Hey everyone, my name's Dave, and today I'll be cleaning up or restoring a couple molding planes. I picked up this set of number 8 hollow and round molding planes from an antique store. They were in pretty good shape, but one was stripped down and the other one was full of shellac, so I'll get them cleaned up and sharpened and ready to use. First step is to disassemble the plane, and then I'll soak the irons in some vinegar. To strip off all the old shellac and grime, I'll use denatured alcohol and wipe it in with a rag. Then I can use an alcohol-soaked piece of Scotch-Brite to work off the rest of the material. The next step is to check the plane sole for flatness. The round here is not very flat, so I'm going to use the hollow to match the profile and flatten the sole of the round. I'll put the hollow in my vise with some 220 grit sandpaper on it, and then I'll run the round plane across the top of it, checking it for flatness along the way and making sure that the profile matches the hollow when it's finished. Once I finish up with the first plane, I'll put it in a vise with some sandpaper and repeat the same process with the second plane. Once I finish both planes, I'll put them together to make sure the profiles match and there's no gaps. I use a sanding block and some fine grit sandpaper to work over the whole plane and get rid of any scratches. I don't want to sand hard enough to change the profile or any of the lines on the plane, just to clean things up. The bed of the plane needed some work. There was a hump in the middle of it, and I needed to ensure that the plane iron would sit flush all the way up against the bed. So I'm using a plane maker float to check for flatness and then hog away a little bit of material, just slightly cleaning up that bed, make sure that the iron will sit flush against it. I'm using a set of plane maker's floats to tune these up, but if you don't have these, you could easily use a thin rasp or file, or even some sandpaper glued to a thin strip of wood. It looks like at some point the wedges got swapped out on one of these planes, so they didn't quite match. One of them had a flat across the top, so here I'm just taking a rasp and working over that top edge and trying to make the two wedges kind of look the same. Once I'm done with all the sanding and body work on these two planes, I'll give them all a coating in some boiled linseed oil rubbed in with some 4/0 steel wool. At this point, the irons have been soaking in vinegar overnight, so I'll use a maroon Scotch-Brite pad just to clean up all of the leftover rust and residue on them. To prevent any more surface rust, I'm just applying a little bit of oil to each iron. I need to shape and sharpen the irons next, so I'm going to start this process by coloring in the irons with a Sharpie, installing them into the body of the plane, and then tracing out the profile of the sole. In this case, I'm using a pick. The process is the same for the hollow and the round plane. So once I've scribed the line into the iron, I'll remove it from the plane and just verify I got a good clean line. Shaping the round's pretty easy. I'm just going to use my grinder. In this case, I'm using a diamond wheel, and the paint can just has water in it, so I'll work the profile a little bit, making sure I don't overheat the iron by dipping it in the water every once in a while, and it's pretty quick and simple to get to a good profile. Shaping the hollow iron is a little bit more challenging. There's a couple ways to do this. Here I'm using a Dremel and just working my way down to the line, removing a little bit of material at a time, not letting the blade get too hot. You could also use some sandpaper on a dowel rod or something, but it would take a little bit longer. While there are plenty of methods that can shape this iron pretty well, I happen to have a belt grinder with a small wheel attachment that I can use to match this profile pretty quickly. Once a bulk of the profiling has been done with whatever method of grinding you choose, the next step is to go to some sharpening stones and flatten the back of the irons. And then here I'm using a diamond slipstone to just sharpen up this profile of the hollow some more. This iron's definitely a little more time consuming, but almost done. I'm at my finest stone here, just removing the burr from the back of the iron. Then I can use a couple of different strops to clean up and polish the edge. The convex shape of the round iron is much easier to profile and sharpen, like I mentioned. Here I'm just going through all my different stones, refining the edge on it, and then I'll do the same with flattening the back, going to my strop and cleaning up and polishing the edge. There's a small ramp that sits down the side of the wedge, and this helps the shavings escape from the plane properly. So I'm making sure that that sits flush, and it will sit flush up against the plane body, and then I'll use a chisel just to sharpen up that edge or clean up that ramp some. This will ensure that the plane functions properly. The last step is to take a little paraffin wax and rub it across that ramp. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that the shavings will escape the plane as easily as possible. So now these planes are ready to go back together. Just a quick recap on what's important in restoring a couple of these old hollows and rounds. You want to make sure that the profiles match each other in a set like this. You want to make sure that the iron sits flush or flat up against the bed of the plane. You want to make sure the wedge sits in there properly and that the shavings can escape the plane as easy as possible. Once the planes are reassembled and all tuned up, I'll pull out the sticking board, and in this case I'm using some curly maple of all woods to really give these a true test, and I'll make some simple profiles. I'm looking to make sure that the shavings escape from the plane properly and without clogging up, and also making sure that I'm not leaving any tracks behind, and that'll kind of tell me that I got the plane irons profiled to match the soles pretty well. I really enjoy using molding planes to stick molding for small furniture projects and stuff. Even though I've recently just built a brand new router table, I'd rather do this by hand whenever possible. I think the finish looks a lot better, especially if you take some of the plane shavings at the end and use that to burnish the molding in, give it a good, nice shiny type of look. These moldings, I think, hand cut, just look a whole lot better than what comes off the machine. Well, anyways, that's my opinion, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, consider liking it, subscribing, and definitely leave a comment. It helps the channel out significantly. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.